had died, only to come back to life 5 hours later. As the village buzzed with curiosity and fear, Ma herself seemed haunted by what she'd seen beyond death. People gathered around her, wanting to know the secrets of the afterlife she had experienced. By evening, a crowd had gathered at Ma's house, each of us hanging on her every word. She began her story, her voice trembling as she spoke. I felt my soul leaving my body, drifting through a dark void. It was a vast, endless space with shadows pulling me into the unknown. As she described this experience, a shiver ran through me. Death had clearly left its mark on her, and now she had seen something no one else had dared to imagine. Ma continued, her voice barely a whisper. The darkness was heavy, like a suffocating mist. I felt I was in an endless tunnel with no escape, surrounded by unfamiliar faces, all silently screaming. I wanted to speak, but even my voice was lost. As she spoke, the crowd grew silent, each of us gripped by the terror in her eyes. Could it be that death wasn't the end but a doorway into unimaginable despair? She went on, in that void, I wasn't alone. I saw countless other souls hovering around me, each trapped in silence, trying to communicate but failing. Their eyes held untold sorrow, as if they'd been there for an eternity. The horror in her expression was impossible to miss. Her tale wasn't just frightening, it was soul-crushing. She'd seen a part of existence we couldn't even imagine. Ma spoke of strange, shadowy figures that circled her, their faces twisted in pain and sorrow. They watched me with hollow, pleading eyes, as though desperate to share their stories. But all I could hear were whispers, the barest fragments of their forgotten lives. The crowd was speechless. Her story seemed more than a tale of the dead, it was a warning, a glimpse into something far darker than any of us had ever known. Ma paused, looking down as if the memories were too painful to relive. In that world, I met a figure, an examiner, perhaps. His face was shadowed, his eyes blazing. He questioned me, asking about my life, my sins, my regrets. Each question cut deep, like he was peeling back layers of my soul. We sat transfixed, realizing that her tale wasn't just a glimpse of death, but a judgment, a moment where every choice was laid bare. She described witnessing souls writhing in agony, caught between worlds, bound by regrets. They were tangled in invisible chains, their faces twisted in eternal anguish, pleading for release. It was like every regret, every wrong choice, had become a weight dragging them down. Her words painted a bleak image of the afterlife, not as a place of peace, but one of endless suffering. Then she described seeing a colossal door, looming ahead, radiating a sense of finality. It felt like the entrance to a world from which there was no return, she whispered, her voice thick with dread. As I drew closer, the air turned cold, and I felt something pulling me toward it, something dark and unrelenting. Her description sent chills through the crowd. This wasn't just death, it was a gateway to something far worse. Just when she felt certain she was about to cross the threshold, Ma said she felt a sudden force pull her back. I heard voices calling my name, a tugging sensation that brought me back to life. The darkness faded, and I opened my eyes to find myself surrounded by familiar faces, yet the terror lingered. Her voice broke, as though she still bore the scars of what she'd seen. Whatever had happened, it hadn't fully released its hold on her. As she finished, Ma's story left us with an unsettling feeling, an awareness that death was not just an end, but the beginning of something we could hardly comprehend. Her tale echoed in our minds long after, a grim reminder of the mystery waiting beyond life's final breath. She had brought back a piece of the afterlife with her, and though she was alive, part of her still remained in that shadowed realm. Ma's story had given us a glimpse of the other side, a truth too terrible to ignore yet impossible to fully understand. Whatever lay beyond life, we knew it was a place of secrets, shadows, and a silence that stretched into eternity.